Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Data Engineering Weekly. This week, we're going to discuss Data Engineering Weekly edition 122. And we have Aswin with us. Hi, Aswin.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you're all doing good. And hopefully, you listened to the last post from Anand and where he shared his experience about his trip to the Data Council and some of the cool startups and technologies that he's observed there. If you've not, please do listen to that podcast as well. I found that very exciting and happy to be here once again to talk about some of the other topics that we've been personally analyzing as well.
Yeah, totally. I think on the edition 122, one of the things that kind of pop out, which is kind of interesting article talking about DBT Reimagined. Now, DBT is one of the most popular data transformation framework available in the market. There's tons of, the mind share on top of it. It's widely get adopted. I think it. I mean, I data engineering weekly. I wrote about the DBT and how Airflow kind of came in and kind of transformed the whole code first data orchestration engine, and then how DBT came in and then bringing this model centric data transformation engine. So this particular article is kind of very interesting about what are the things DBT can be missing, and can you reimagine DBT to the better DBT world? Like maybe we could call it DBT plus. I don't know. So what do you think of this article?
I think it's an interesting article. I think like how the author Pedram basically comes up and says he woke up, could not sleep, and he woke up from his sleep, or probably went into a fantasy land to write about how he would reimagine and rethink on DBT. I think DBT has been great from its launch, providing a templatized engine. Those of you who do not know, DBT is based over a Jinja-based template. And from my personal feedback from people who have used Jinja as a backend for even Python code, are not very comfortable because it's not very rich. And I think probably DBT inherited the same problem, right? So one of the things that Pedram starts about is kind of compare LookML's capabilities as a DSL and compares that to a templatized YAML-based framework, YAML plus other templates that the Jinja one provides that DBT is then built on, right? So, and he talks about how the model complexity becomes as and when your model becomes heavy, you're having more models to do validation and maintenance becomes a little bit more difficult as well, right? So that's the start. What's your point of that?
Yeah, totally. I completely agree with DSL over templated code. Even in my writing the article in the Data Engineering Weekly, I was kind of mentioning like 3-4 months back. I asked in Master Channel like is there anyone thought about DBT like system without Jinja template? I know some kind of a native programming language. That's what Petron was kind of also talking about. Is I was kind of maybe imagining like maybe it's called PL plus plus or something like that, right? So I'm a very big fan of compilers. I feel like a strong compiler can fix a lot of software errors, or catch software errors, can boost a lot of productivity from the developers. Even if you see the Python is kind of moving from a duck typing to bring in more and more type safetiness into the system. The challenge with this having the Jinja templating, I found out like two things. One is like it is on runtime, so you have to build it and then you have to do some kind of a simulation running and to understand like whether you did it correct or not. So the end SQL that you are going to produce is not going to be the same that what you would expect. And the other major part is like the Jinja template and the SQL is like not blending it very well.
Correct.
They're like a two different programming model.
Yes.
It adds more mental overhead, and also it's add more cognitive load. And also, I'm often in the other side of um, as someone is kind of overseeing a lot of changes happening in the data engineering in my day-to-day work. I was always in the end where I had to read a lot of code, like review a lot of code. When I review the code, I found out like DBT is kind of very hard to read because of this nature, right? I had to run it, generate and compile the SQL code to understand what is really doing the business logic side of it. And for me to add that cognitive load, like how Jinja template going to work, how SQL going to work, combine both and do the code review. And that is kind of the biggest pain point for me. And that's one of the reasons why I asked, like, hey, maybe a PL SQL person we could choice. And I don't know, maybe, but like
I think
using chat.
not to
Yeah.
steal the thunder away from DBT, I think they managed to bring that template and build models and macros on top of SQL, which is the challenge with SQL and the limitations around SQL. I think they've done a pretty good job at that. But then, as you rightly said, the complexity of the code makes it complex for maintenance, complex for even writing it. I would say even building that isn't that not very straightforward. It's not straightforward in my point of view.
Yeah. I think other interesting dynamics is what is creating. I think a lot goes to Airflow, like Airflow first bring those macros into the picture.
Correct.
I don't know whether DBT copied that, like followed that. I don't know, no idea. But what is happening right now, it's pushing, because DBT is so popular, any new framework kind of going to introduce, they has to create like a DBT compatible thing. And I was reading through SQL Mesh recently, and they kind of going like, oh, we support Jinja template. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this is gonna be continuing, right? So I mean, it was an accidental complexity. It's gonna be there for a very long time, I hope. I think so. So yeah, that's one of the things nicely called out by Pedram cases, and he's likely talking about debuggers also for the same reason, right? The only way for me to now debug is to kind of do so runtime.
Runtime,
So,
yes.
and all those high-level programming languages as a first-class support in the IDE debuggers, and can I do the line over line debugging so that I can better understand what is happening? So I think that's a very good call out, very fair call out in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think he also talks about updating column data types and basically updating across different models wherever there is dependencies. Again, something classic that we typically encounter in the programming world, but he's reimagining it, saying that, hey, can we use generative AI to kind of use that to describe columns and understand dependencies and all that. I think definitely possible, or probably DBT is thinking about that. Right. I also come from a world where we use low-code tools to generate code. Like for Talent, we generate Java code based on whatever you configure on top of the GUI. Probably DBT, are they building something like that? No idea. But then, yeah, that's also another way to reimagine it, right? Generate DBT code using actions or graphical interfaces. Does that make sense, Anand? Or?
I'm kind of a favor. Well, I'm very much into the kind of programming first approach.
Okay.
But I also understand like there is a fair bit of market for GUI based approach also. And when we talk about low code, I kind of favor creating a code explicitly, not implicitly, right? For example, okay, you give this GUI interface, and then I create this. Can you create me a code and commit the code into GitHub and make it my code review on top of it? Rather than like, I will do this magic internally, but I will not expose what code I'm generating automatically inside. That is because it's not like a SQL engine that I write a SQL. I mean, the SQL database is kind of implicitly either to a code gen or some rule-based execution. Like there's two execution engines available there. I don't really care what is going on inside because I have a very high level dynamics that I'm kind of expressing, and it does what it does to do that. Does data transformation also fall into the same pictures? I don't know. I think this is something kind of, yet to decide. I believe there's a fair share of market for both, like a low code, no code versus, and then the code first approach. I think it's all, I think it's, but I'm also kind of talking about it's all boiled back to the last point you were talking about unit testing.
Oh yeah.
If you're making a GUI interface, can you make a unit test? No.
Yes and no. I think some tools don't allow you to do that. I think it's very interesting, right? So even what Pedram talks about, right? So you want to write a query and then ask it to run over a small simple DuckDB instance in order to validate pieces of logic. I think that's very interesting, right? You're you may want to run it on a billion rows on top of Databricks and over Spark, but then over a Spark SQL, but then all you want to do is just validate that simple logic works on a small database installed locally, which is around Duck, right? So without any external dependencies, again, he reimagines a lot of these portions of how it is done today. Unit testing is definitely possible even in low-code tools, but then with the logo tool, it becomes all the more easier, right? Because it's all GUI controlled. You can test a big piece of your logic as opposed to doing individual blocks. So it becomes a lot more easier. But even then, it's definitely possible as well to test in both local and in a proper environment as well. So that's definitely possible. I think in short, what I read about how Pedram is reimagining, right, is number one, the maturity of DBT, I think, is not at the level that it needs to be. Probably they are working on that, and probably they would work on it to solve a lot of use cases for the analytical engineers. I think that unit testing, debugging, maintainability of code, I think that becomes a challenge. Even readability of code again, right? So all of that are common challenges that people are facing with DBT, and reimagining that is what Pedram has done. A fantastic job of providing that.
Yeah, I was kind of asked, like, what are the other things that people build internally or externally about DBT like simple system? And after that, I kind of discovering, like, SQL meshes is something that I discovered recently.
Yeah.
I know a few startups kind of trying to do similar things on DBT.
You encountered Malloy as well recently.
Yeah, Malloy is kind of something like kind of a very interesting experimental programming language for us right now on top of SQL. It's kind of, I think it's more like reimagining SQL rather than reimagining DBT. So that's on the very another level completely. And I wish like more and more experimentation comes on top of SQL. I do believe that. I think the team from Criteo, Criteo actually reached out to me, and I was kind of sharing their data pipelining, how they built an internal version of our DBT sim kind of system, which is a compiler first approach. I wish they open source it. I think that's a very, very interesting tool to watch out for that.
Yeah, perfect. And I think in case you're listening to this podcast and you've not listened to Anand's mention of Malloy and his encounter with them at Data Council, look up for the previous podcast. Anand shares some more details around his observation of this particular space and why he's generally excited about Malloy as well.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a good point to kind of take our next topic, which is to change data capture at Brex.
It's a favorite topic of mine.
The article is kind of very well written. It kind of gone from like in the incubation phase to idealizing the system and various other various architectural aspect of it. They're talking about control plane and the data plane, how they went about architecture, that part of it. Also the lifecycle management of the task, what is a failure recovery case going to look like, and also secret key management side of it. I thought it's a very very well written from.
It's a very good blog, Anand. Yeah, but I think before we go, for the purpose of for clarity, let's discuss what is change data capture, because there are different definitions of that. Let's start with that, Anand. Like, what is change data capture in the industry? What's the definition? And then we take from there.
Yeah, not necessarily a bookmark style of a definition, but essentially change data capture is like every system running their own operational data stores. Like it could be a MongoDB, it could be your MySQL system or a Postgres system, and every change is kind of written like every time you're doing updating, deleting, or like so you're modifying your records, system of records. Essentially, that's for your business, and all the changes are go through some kind of a replication log from the databases, which is called bin logs. So this change data capture is a mechanism that you can actually listen to those logs, that what the database is written by internally, and then capture that and stream that and reproduce in the data warehouse side of it, so that you will get a granular changes that what is going on in your system of record, which is your operational database. So
in a real-time mode.
In a real-time mode.
I think we can add that also.
Yes.
That's a great definition, and I think my first encounter of CDC was during my Informatica days. I think 2013 timeframe when we were implementing, and I was personally doing the CDC POC for a bank, right? And the goal really was not to put the load. See, because banks in most places operate, the peak load is between the working hours, right? So that time we didn't have all of these UPI and all of it. So the peak load was between 9 to 5 India time zone, right? That's where most of the banking transactions were happening. So during that particular time is where a lot of regulatory reporting, end of the day computation, all that happens. And what we need to do was never put load on the database. So that was the number one reason we had to
Right.
read from bin log. If I were to do a lot of select and every team starts doing analytics, starts doing moving data for regulatory report at the end of the day, forex submission and all of that, it puts heavy load on the system. So the alternate option was to have a very less, you have to read it as at a lower latency. You also do not have to put any load on the system. So we then had to read from the bin logs. And that was one of the reasons why we started reading from bin logs. And most customers who are implementing CDC started with that use case, right? I don't want to put a load, or I don't
Mhm.
have any mechanisms by which I can do read the changes. For example, some of your package software,
Mhm.
including like of erstwhile use cases
Mhm.
like SAP on top of Oracle, Finacle on top of Oracle, do not even have timestamp on it. So the only other way were to read was to get it from the bin log. So yeah, that's one of the reasons where we used to do that, and then read it real time, or at least close to real time in less than a minute, and then write it to another ODS store, like you said, or a warehouse, to then perform your downstream analysis. Is one of the top use cases that we have seen CDC being used.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point that you mentioned. Like, what is the inception point of CDC to be get introduced? When a company is kind of started to grow, and then you still querying your operational data source, and then your upstream is not very happy with you, and then they kind of, well, at some point of a time, it's like I'm saying like 40% is not a random number. It's like a previous experience. Like 40% of your load is actually analytical query, and then the upstream's kind of alarmed with it, and like, hey, get off my operating system, my data steward. And then, oh, okay, we do CDC, we mimic everything and put that one into our data warehouse, and then we start querying of it. That usually the very first start. It's a very good. I mean, it's good to bootstrap, I think, with a very minimal disruption across engineering team with minimal dependencies. The CDC is kind of a very interesting
But
approach.
also real-time analytics becoming, I think people always want to do real-time analytics, but then let's do another debate on when to do it. Is it appropriate for everyone and all of it? But then if you're on the journey of doing real-time analytics or decision making using real-time data, then CDC is definitely something you should definitely look about it. Other than the latency issues and all that we highlighted, a lot of tools available in the market. I think at Brex they're using Debezium, right? One of
Yeah.
my personal
Yeah,
favorite.
DBT is a very well matured and then kind of widely adopted change data capture system. So yeah, definitely, it's a very interesting approach. And they also kind of mention about the DB log, a watermark based change data capture framework, which was written by Netflix, if I'm wrong. Yeah, it was written by Netflix. That's also a very interesting paper to read. I have not read it fully. That's a good reminder for me. It's a good read
Probably
for
we
my.
should discuss that, Anand, in one
Yeah,
of your weeklies
yeah,
and in a podcast as well.
yeah, totally, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we'll cut this part, this short one. We'll cut it. Yeah, I think deep with Kafka coming into picture and becoming mainstream in enterprise architectures, right? So one of the things about earlier erstwhile CDC implementation that I've seen is you read it, you replicate it, right? What CDC was primarily doing was replication into a low cost storage. It could
Mhm.
be a similar system on a lower infrastructure, not your production grade infrastructure, but your analytical set of infrastructure. With Kafka coming in, it becomes a little bit more interesting, right? Instead of replicating it onto my downstream database, I move it to a Kafka queue, and that becomes as the point of subscription for different downstream systems and teams. So I replicate once, and it's all out there. for my teams to then manage different pointers and take it from there. I think even at Brex, they're using Kafka, if I'm not wrong. That's what I think he's also sharing as an architecture.
Yeah. Totally. Kafka became like a very standard streaming side of it. Yeah.
And then with say KSQL, I've seen at, if I'm not wrong, at Equifax, if I'm not wrong, they replicate and they used to fetch all the incremental transactions and then do a deduplication using some software and write the output to Elasticsearch. I think much similar patterns that I observe at Brex as well.
Yeah.
Anand, if I may ask, like, what do you think are some of the challenges when it comes to CDC? I know you recently wrote a very interesting article about event streaming as well.
Right. Yeah. So there's a recent article about the engineering guide to for the event creation side of it. My take on CDC is it's, as I mentioned before, it's a very good first start if you don't have anything and you wanted to have a minimal disruption on your system, and then you can have a CDC side of it. But the challenge with CDC as a standalone event processing system for your data warehouse is that soon you will figure it out. But all your operational data stores are normalized data structure. And what the operational data store is actually going to record is after the fact. Like that some kind of a business transaction happened, and it was going to, the operational store going to store the normalized, highly normalized versions of after the fact the system of records being changed. An order being placed, there will be an order table that's going to change, and then the product page is going to reduce the capacity, and it goes on. Like it'll touch base upon multiple tables that it's going to be changing for the particular business process. But when you're reading this table alone, you will completely miss the context. What is the business process actually happened? There will be multiple business process going to happen that could create a similar kind of a system of record changes. Now you will be forced to rewrite the whole business process again on your data warehouse to recreate the context. And that is very expensive to do that.
Correct.
And many of the people are relying on CDC is paying, blaming DBT or blaming, saying that Snowflake debt and all those things. The fact is this, you are taking data that just completely missed the context. And you are now trying to coordinate with multiple people to understand what is the context. And then you have to rewrite back and bring the context back. And for that is an expensive computation. Is a computation-wise an expensive thing. And also from a human to human communication is also very expensive. And there you are paying the Snowflake debt. So CDC is a blessing but it's also very, very dangerous. So you have to be very careful what change data that you have to capture.
Yes.
Are you going to have a one entity, which is you have a very one or two table that you can easily recreate the business context around it, or you just simply wanted to listen some entity lifecycle changes? CDC is a very good system, but you are going to rely on, I'm going to rely on CDC for full analytics and product analytics side of it. I think you will pay a very hefty fine, hefty price for that.
Okay. What's your feedback and takeaway on Snowflake integrating data changes? Like Snowflake's strategy these days is to have transaction data that's happening on different apps. For example, they recently announced ServiceNow's integration on top of Snowflake, Salesforce integration on top of Snowflake, where they're able to take the changes and replicate it onto Snowflake, and then the data is already available there. Now, if you look at even Brex, that's kind of what they're doing. Obviously, yes, they're not taking it from apps, they're taking it from databases, internal systems. But what do you think on the other end of the spectrum on Snowflake strategy and how they're addressing these event and change captures?
Yeah, I think the whole notion of zero ETL is that what you're trying to say that one?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to.
Well, zero ETL is a very interesting thing. I think it's also kind of go to this particular thing, right? Like, okay, I'm using Amazon Aurora and I'm using Snowflake, and you just dump into whatever the change data is capturing this thing. I think the crucial key is the context. There is nothing called zero ETL. It's somebody doing an ETL for you. It's not like Amazon Aurora are going to do the transaction on Snowflake alone, right? It's somebody is kind of doing the piping for you. Whether you are doing it or somebody else is doing it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the whole concept of zero ETL. Zero ETL means that there is nothing, is this kind of ingestion is happening there. There is some kind of a replication is happening. When you are transform a packet from one place to another place, can you, with that packet, can you able to carry the envelope, can you able to carry the full context to the next bucket? Then it makes sense to either you do it or outsource it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you don't transfer the context, or you will not able to refer that and get the context from any external systems, then you have to recreate the context. So for that, you better not to replicate the system alone, right? That's my take. It's like that would be my choice. If somebody doing my ETL, I'm totally fine. I'm really amazed to do that one. I don't need to do any work. But if they miss the context, then it's like 5x works for me, and that's not a very productive way to spend time in a company, essentially.
Perfect. I think just to summarize and give credit to the team at Brex who have implemented this a wonderful blog around how they've implemented the BZM and the whole logic of CTC at Brex, because they've covered the whole lifeline as life cycle, as Anand was mentioning at the start, of how they manage the data plane, which is the BZM, how they manage the control plane, how they've implemented security, which is integrating with AWS Secret Manager, etc., and how they encountered some of the pitfalls and challenges with Postgres, building from Postgres using CTC and all of that. I think fantastic blog by the team, and thanks to Junso for kind of summarizing that in one beautiful blog.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the highlights that I really like in the blog is that the inbuilt for tolerance in the Kafka connectors, right? Like the Kafka connector class will transition into a failing state. If it's kind of failing, the operator will automatically detect it. Oh, there's some kind of a start that's kind of failing, and it kind of restart the states and failed connectors and tasks to recover. That inbuilt auto recover state machine, they kind of build it with the control plane and the data plane format. I really like that. I think that's a very wonderful piece of engineering.
This is wonderful. I think I missed that. That's a good point.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's a good segue to kind of move to topic 3, which is on data product and how to describe them by Max.
Well, that's a topic which I don't know why we encounter that almost every other week or almost every week.
Why are we talking about data product? I don't know.
We take a break, but then I think it's just a highlight, right? I think at Gartner they did bring about data products. At Data Council, I think you heard data mesh, data products a little bit. So I think generally the industry is moving towards a decentralized model. There's a push towards that. Whether it will succeed, it's a different story. But I think data products are completely a game changer in terms of an approach towards how we build data projects today. So I think that's a great way to put about it. I think the author Max uses a library example as a start. I like it because I think his father was a librarian. My father started his career as a librarian as well, coincidentally.
Oh.
So at SPIC. So at SPIC, where you also know, like they used to have a very good club and started. Then he moves to material management, both of which is around managing data or managing information about materials or books or whatever. So he became a material manager, working on SAP at the later part of his career. So so he started his career as librarian. I think similarly, I think what actually happens in both the material manager or the store manager or whatever is an example, or a librarian, is there's a lot of tribal knowledge that lives with people, and exposing that is what the online index cards and online library management systems kind of solve, because you are able to give feedback, you're able to recommend, you're able to search, and you get some data around the data or the books or the materials that are being consumed on a regular basis. So these are systems which are exchanged quite frequently, and so is data. I think he does a good example and a segue to introducing why data products are important and how we need to bring in that sort of approach into the data product world as well, right? The tribal knowledge needs to come in and becomes more democratized into the data product world.
Yeah, I think one of the things I really liked about this article by Max, and was talking about how he became, from a skeptic to all the way to, okay, this is the future, this is what we wanted to build, and he was kind of go ahead and define about data products and write about it. I think that's a very the evolving of the thought process is very wonderful to watch in the blog. And he also kind of very interestingly describe about like what do you mean by data products? It's really
Oh,
so it
that's
kind of goes through very broader definitions from like it could be a data set or a table or a view, or it could be an API where a stream of data comes in, or even a machine learning model. So the point he was making is like anything that you package and then kind of expose to a consumer that has a producer-consumer relationship, you can tag them as a data product. I think the first time I'm kind of seeing the machine learning model also kind of a part of the data product. So it's
even BI. I would have
of
added BI to this as well. I think even a BI model, a BI dashboard
dashboards. Yeah.
can be a data product. I love it, Max. I think Max, you'll be listening to this. I like your example of library because what the library does is helps people search for the books that they want. In the data product world, and today the challenge so catalogs tend to solve it to some extent. Again, we're not going to get into catalog now because me and Anand can go for next 1 hour. We want this session to be short, but then catalogs promised to solve that. But when you package products with proper documentation, with all the non-functional attributes, it's also important to expose the library system, which is around helping people search and get what they want and be happy about the overall experience, right? Rather than fiddling around 20 different tables and then trying to join and understand definitions and all that. We should start creating a proper documented serving layer that people can consume. Produced domain models. So data products are very domain driven by nature. So I think that's a part. So that means that searching becomes a lot more easier. If you go into a library, it's always documented by book categories, right? Fiction, kids, non-fiction, motivation, and all that. So you're starting to produce more subcategories which are more domain driven. And similarly in the data world, again, that's something that we definitely need to do it. Creating more domain-driven data models. We do it it's not that we don't do it today properly. We do it in parts, except that we don't do a whole collaborative experience, right? We create fact tables, dimension tables, data marts, but then there's no documentation around it. The discovery becomes a problem, and we don't focus on the data quality aspects. We don't provide and maintain all of this like a product. We don't have a product first approach to anything, right? The whole documentation of it also does not talk about who owns it, who to contact, and all of it. I think that's a part. And what's a contract? Say again, that's another thing. Should start with contracts. Start with who owns it, access requirements, how much a service layer for this, because there's a SLAs for it. If there is a breakage, when will the next refresh happen? All of this needs to be packaged over a set of tables, over a BI dashboard, over ML model. It could be, as long as you do all of this, I think that becomes a complete data product, right? So I use this example of any packaged good that we buy, right from packaged chips to packaged mobile phones or laptops. All of this comes with information around who's the manufacturer, whom to contact for issues, what is the profile of it, the observability metrics around, hey, if you eat this, you get so much carbohydrate, so much fats. All of that are documented. So as a consumer, when I'm consuming, I know all of that information. Is it fresh? How long is it going to be good? How long is this data valid? Because data also expires the next day, right? I can't use previous days data. All of that information when it's packaged becomes a wonderful data product. I think Max has documented that really well.
Yeah, I think to your point, right? Max had clearly, there's a wonderful diagram on this kind of clearly segregating, like, this is a build time thing, this is a runtime thing. So build time, that's usually that I call it as like, your structural property versus a behavioral property of a data product. So in the build time of the structural property, Max was talking about capturing, what's the name of it? What's the description, owner, location, contract, engagement, links, schema, your data provenance, sensitivity of the data, regulatory requirement, risk, ethical consideration, reference queries. Oh, reference queries is an interesting thing. A glossary, terms, service level objective, version, and life cycles. Kind of like, it's not like, okay, if you take this data product, these are the full description that you have to
Yeah,
add
that's
on
wonderful.
the build time, and you also kind of linked how the workflow can also happen. You can create this one. The owners can be contacted via Slack or a team or any Jira ticket can be assigned to that one. Any bug report or based on your contract is kind of violated, or bug report can goes to Jira, or a
Totally.
new feature request or it can happen on the contract side of it that can go to a feature request process can be go to Jira or Slack or any other things. And so I think that's a very interesting connection. Not only the the properties of the data product, but also the workflow associated with that one. It's really
Totally.
amazing.
Totally. Anand, let's double click on the point that you just mentioned, reference queries. I would like to double click on it as well because it's very interesting. Right? Many times we just dump data without
Mm-hmm.
thinking about our end users.
Mm-hmm.
Now, contracts bring in the regulation between the consumers and the producers. It solves the producer-consumer problem. But what if the producers of the data also tell people how to use the data when they're encountering it? Can they
All right.
solve for it? Will that not drive consumption? Is a wonderful thought process. I think reference queries tend to solve a very well documented, well annotated set of models that people can run to execute it. Now, isn't it like the hello world that we do when we install a new software? The first version of it makes us feel comfortable, but then on a regular basis, when we start encountering data, and for new people who are coming on top of the data, it becomes easier if you have reference queries which says, hey, run this query to get this, run this query to get this. And over a period of time, even as reference queries can have a life cycle around, depending on different type of queries that get executed, people can update their reference queries. What's your experience and take on that?
Yeah, totally. I think templated query is kind of very interesting approach. How not only kind of telling like what is there, but also kind of how to use that and can anything that can make people from to go from 0 to 1. I always like that because it put empathy towards a user to make your product much more easy to use. I think that goes a long way in my opinion. Yeah, I think, but I never seen this. Have you seen this referential query anywhere?
Um, in one of the projects, again, these was way before all the cloud warehouses and all of that became popular. It was just over
Right.
Oracle, and during my time with Mattel for a migration project.
Yeah.
And this, I don't even remember who the customer on the other side was. I don't remember him by his name, but then he used to ask us to write simple queries to describe the joints and all of that, and keep it in a notebook, not notebook. It was just a notepad txt file that back then, and use that, right? So, and basically create it as part of our release cycle itself. And the reasoning was this person did not know SQL well. The reason was
Okay.
not about documentation. This person was, hey, why don't you give me all of this so that every time there is an issue, I will run this. So it
Right.
is
Right.
just that if you package it now in a well-defined manner, so that you're also thinking about end user consumption patterns, and if new person comes to the team, he doesn't have to go to 100 different places, ask 100 different people to do that. He'll have it there, and he can start experience. That's a wonderful experience. I think we are in a world where tech becomes so easier. Generative AI and all of that is going to change that, but
Yeah.
then the experience of it, I think, is what we are reimagining in
Yeah.
data product world. I would say that's product thinking applied.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, like in the era of ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot, they
Copilot
should
would definitely be
they
there.
should, they should automatically generate the reference query for me. I think I don't know how to define that.
Yeah, correct. Actually, that's also
Yeah.
an interesting way to solve it, right? So you should definitely do use integrate ChatGPT or one of the LLMs to then figure out
Mhm.
how do you write in reference queries, right, for different user personas? Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Documentation is key. That's what we are saying, right? Documentation.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I really like this blog by Max, kind of not only giving a great analogy, but also going in depth and say like classify clearly what is the build time, runtime side of it. How do we kind of build end-to-end data product and continuously monitor that part of it, and what is the role of data contract associated with that one. And it's all clauses. It's kind of very documented. I think that's one of the probably the best article I have seen around data product. So thank you so much, Max, for writing that one.
That's great.
Awesome. So with this, we come to a conclusion, like end of our Data Engineering Weekly 122 edition. So until we meet with you on our edition 123, have a goodbye.
Thank you all. Thank you for listening. Have a good the rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.
Have a good day, Srin. Bye.
Bye.